I pulled the blanket higher over my belly, the seventh time swollen and heavy, and listened to her voice drift across the living room. Calm, casual, like she was commenting on the weather. When the baby comes, this house will be yours. Both of you, you'll be taken care of. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. For a split second, I believed her. I let myself imagine a front porch with rocking chairs, a nursery painted soft yellow, a space that finally belonged to us. But in the same breath, she added, "For now, you'll just have to keep waiting. Patience, dear. A woman should know her place." It was like being promised a glass of water when you're parched, then having the cup snatched away right before your lips touch it. My throat went dry. My hands gripped the armrest so tight my knuckles ached. I didn't argue. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't even sigh. I just nodded, as if her words didn't sting, as if my chest wasn't tightening like a door slammed shut. Across the room, my husband stared at his shoes. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. And the silence was louder than her voice, louder than the television murmuring in the background, louder than the hum of the fridge. Something inside me shifted that night, quiet but final, like the creak of a hinge before the door falls off. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. I simply stood, smoothed the wrinkles out of my maternity dress, and walked to the bedroom. My suitcase was still tucked under the bed from the last doctor's visit. I pulled it out. The zipper stuck, of course. It always did. But I tugged until it gave. Folding clothes into that suitcase, I thought of all the years I'd waited. Waited for her to soften. Waited for her to keep a promise. Waited for my husband to put his hand on my shoulder and say, "We'll build something of our own." I waited through pregnancies, through cramped rooms, through whispered comments that made my ears burn. But I couldn't wait anymore. I packed slowly, deliberately, like each shirt and pair of jeans was a piece of armor. My breath came steady, even when my heart was racing. Even when the baby shifted inside me, a reminder that I wasn't leaving alone. When I closed that suitcase, it was louder than any argument. The click of the latch was my reply to her words. The sound of finality. I lifted it, carried it to the front door, and set it down. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. She tilted her head like she was trying to decide whether I was bluffing. "Where do you think you're going?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Some silences are sharper than words. I slipped on my shoes, picked up the suitcase handle, and opened the door. The night air met me like a splash of cold water, crisp and real. Behind me, her voice rose an octave. "Don't be foolish. You'll be back." Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Maybe she thought my swollen belly tethered me to her roof, to her rules, to her promises that always dissolved like sugar in hot tea. I didn't turn around. I stepped outside. I closed the door gently, almost politely, as though I was just leaving for groceries. But I wasn't, and that's when everything began to change. If you've ever had someone make promises they never intended to keep, you know exactly how heavy silence can feel. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Now, let's get back to the woman who walked away with nothing but her unborn child, a suitcase, and a decision that would shake her family more than any argument ever could. The night I left, the air was sharp, almost metallic. September in our town always carried that smell: dry leaves, faint wood smoke, the neighbor's lawnmower sputtering one last time before winter. I walked down the porch steps slowly, suitcase bumping against each wooden plank, and for a moment I thought maybe she would follow me, call my name, say something that would make me turn back. She didn't. The only sound was the door clicking shut behind me. I slid into the driver's seat, my belly pressing against the steering wheel more than I'd like to admit. The car smelled like old coffee and crayons from my kids, reminders of every errand and late-night grocery run. I gripped the wheel and sat there for a long minute. It was strange. I thought I'd feel terrified. Instead, I felt light, like someone had cut a string I didn't even know was tied around my ribs. As the engine turned over, I remembered the invitation that started it all. She had called 2 weeks earlier, her tone sweet but clipped, asking if I could stop by. "We need to discuss the future," she'd said. I thought maybe she meant baby names or nursery colors, but no, she meant her house. She meant control. That evening, the house was buzzing when I arrived. Lamps glowed in the living room, the smell of roast chicken clung to the walls, and the television murmured low. My husband sat on the couch, shoulders rounded, scrolling through his phone like he was trying to disappear into it. She was at the dining table, papers stacked neatly in front of her. Contracts, maybe. Or maybe just junk mail. She liked to use props when she wanted to seem official. "Sit down," she said, not looking up from the pile. Her voice was calm, but I felt the trap closing. I sat, smoothed my dress over my knees, tried to steady my breathing. The chair creaked under me, loud in the silence. She started soft, painting pictures of the future. "When the baby comes, this home will be yours," she said. She smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. I felt the hope rise in me before I could stop it. She'd never given me much, but maybe this was the turning point. Maybe she saw me, finally, as family. Then the shift came. "But not yet," she added, her tone firm now. "You'll need to wait. Be patient. A good wife knows her place." She said it like she was reciting scripture, like it was fact carved in stone. My husband cleared his throat, but the sound died in the air. He didn't speak. He never did when it mattered. That was the moment something cracked inside me. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just looked at her, nodded once, and tucked the words away. Later, while she was distracted, I walked to the bedroom and pulled out that stubborn old suitcase. Each shirt I folded was like stacking proof against her. Proof that I'd endured, proof that I'd waited, proof that I was done. The scene replays in my head even now, the way the curtains swayed slightly with the evening breeze, the smell of lemon cleaner mixed with roast chicken, the steady tick of the clock in the hallway. Life looked ordinary on the surface, but underneath, it was splitting apart. Driving away that night, I kept the windows cracked. The baby shifted again, reminding me that every choice I made wasn't just for me. I thought of the times before when she dismissed my cooking in front of guests, when she handed me my own birthday gift, with the tag still reading her daughter's name, when she told my kids, "Grandma's the real mother here." Little cuts, all of them, small enough to ignore if you wanted peace. But together, they carved something deep. I pulled into a motel lot on the edge of town, neon buzzing, the sign half burnt so it read only, "Tell." I checked in with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The clerk didn't ask questions. He just handed me a key attached to a chipped plastic fob. Room 1-2. I carried my suitcase up the narrow stairs, every step echoing like punctuation. Inside, the room smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke. The carpet was worn, the lamp leaned a little to the left, and the bedspread had a floral pattern that looked tired. But it was mine. For the first time in years, the space was mine. I set the suitcase down, lowered myself onto the bed, and exhaled so deeply, I thought the walls might hear me. In that quiet, I realized something. Leaving wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. And though she thought she still had me tethered to her house, her promises, her conditions, I was already gone. And the truth? She hadn't even begun to see what that meant. I lay on that stiff motel bed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, and the memories came back like they always do. They didn't arrive in order. They never do. They came in flashes, moments that stacked on top of each other, until the weight was unbearable. The first one was years ago, before the second baby, when I thought maybe things would settle. We'd been invited to dinner at her place, just the four of us. I baked a pie from scratch, peach, because I knew it was her favorite. I walked in proud, balancing the dish in both hands, still warm from the oven. She looked at it, smiled politely, then slid it aside and pulled out her own dessert, store-bought cheesecake. "Just in case yours didn't turn out," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My husband laughed nervously, reached for the cheesecake first, and I told myself not to mind. It was small, right? But it stuck like a splinter under the skin. Another time, at Christmas, the whole family gathered around the tree. She handed out gifts, shiny boxes, bows tied neatly. My kids tore into their packages, beaming, until my oldest pulled out a toy with a tag that still had her other daughter-in-law's name scratched faintly on it. Regifted, carelessly. I looked at her face, waiting for an apology, but she just raised an eyebrow like daring me to call her out. I didn't. I smiled, whispered thank you, and carried on. Then there was the birthday, my 35th. She offered to host. I thought maybe it was an olive branch. Maybe she was trying. But when I arrived, balloons and cake and music playing, I realized quickly it wasn't for me. It was for her niece, who had graduated that week. My name wasn't on the cake. My kids whispered, "Mom, why does it say congratulations, Anna?" I laughed it off, told them it was fine, but inside I felt the air leave my lungs. I blew out candles that weren't even meant for me. Each of these moments was small enough to excuse if you wanted peace. That was her power. None of them looked catastrophic alone. But together, they told a story. A story where I was never enough, never the right one, always a placeholder in her perfect picture. I remembered the times she used her words like hooks. A real mother would do it this way. "You're lucky we let you stay here. You know this house has been in the family for generations. Don't get any ideas." Always framed as advice, never outright cruelty, but sharp enough to bleed if you listen too closely. And my husband, bless him, always silent. He would nod, sip his drink, change the subject. Later he'd tell me, "That's just how she is. Don't take it personally." But how do you not take it personally when it's your name she forgets, your children she sidelines, your sacrifices she brushes aside? The motel air conditioner rattled, pulling me back to the present. I turned onto my side, clutching the pillow under my belly, and thought of the promises. Always promises. She promised to help with childcare, but never showed. Promised to pay us back for covering her medical bills, but somehow forgot. Promised to put us in the will, then hinted she'd changed it. And now, the house. A house she dangled like bait every time she wanted obedience. 7 pregnancies, 7 rounds of swollen ankles, back pain, sleepless nights, and still she saw me as temporary. As if the years I gave her son, the grandchildren I carried, weren't enough to make me belong. I closed my eyes and saw her expression from that last night. The faint smile, the sharp glint in her eyes when she said, "Not yet. A good wife knows her place." It wasn't about the house. It never was. It was about power, about reminding me that in her world, I'd always be waiting at the threshold, never truly inside. And I had believed her before, too many times. I had told myself patience was love, that endurance was strength, that maybe one day she'd look at me and see a daughter. But all those nights folding laundry in a cramped room, all those mornings making breakfast while she criticized the way I scrambled eggs, all those years of biting my tongue, they added up. They led me here, to a motel room with a flickering light and a baby shifting inside me, reminding me that silence wasn't protection, it was surrender. I pressed a hand against my belly, felt a kick, and whispered, "Not anymore." For the first time I meant it. The past was still heavy, but it wasn't going to decide my future. That night, staring at the cracked wallpaper, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. The house wasn't security. It wasn't a gift. It was a leash. And I had finally unclipped it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of traffic outside the motel window. Trucks rumbled down the highway, tires hissing on wet pavement. A storm had passed overnight, leaving the air sharp and clean. I sat up slowly, my back stiff from the thin mattress, and rubbed the sleep from my eyes. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The peeling wallpaper, the humming air conditioner, the thin blanket that barely covered me, it wasn't home. But then again, what was? I sat on the edge of the bed, my suitcase open at my feet. Clothes folded in neat stacks looked out of place in the worn room. The baby shifted, a steady reminder that I couldn't linger here forever. I needed a plan. I needed somewhere safe, somewhere that didn't feel borrowed. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from my husband, just 4 words. "Where are you?" No hello, no I'm worried, no are you safe. Just the question, blunt and empty. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. I could answer, tell him about the motel, the room that smelled of bleach, the restless night. Or I could say nothing. In the end, I set the phone down. Silence had been his language for years. Maybe it was time I learned it too. By noon, I had packed again. The suitcase zipper snagged like always, but I yanked it free and rolled it to the car. The air outside carried the faint scent of gasoline from the diner across the lot. I stopped there for lunch, a grilled cheese and fries, the kind of food that felt more like a hug than a meal. The waitress called me hone and refilled my water twice without asking. She didn't know me, but she treated me kinder in 10 minutes than my mother-in-law had in 10 years. Back in the car, I thought about turning around. Thought about pulling into the driveway, walking inside, pretending last night had been a mistake. It would be easier. No questions, no sideways looks from neighbors, no explaining to the kids why Mom had left. But then I remembered the way she tilted her head, the glint in her eye, the words that sliced sharper than any shout. A good wife knows her place. That was the moment the door had closed, even if my feet hadn't yet stepped through it. I drove past familiar landmarks, the gas station where we bought slushies on hot days, the park where my kids learned to ride bikes, the grocery store where she once criticized me for buying generic cereal. Each place carried a memory, some sweet, some bitter, all tangled together. It felt like leaving wasn't just a choice. It was untangling myself from a net that had held me for too long. By late afternoon, I found myself parked outside my sister's house. She lived 2 towns over, in a little white bungalow with peeling paint and a garden of stubborn daisies. I hadn't told her much about what went on in my husband's family. I always downplayed it, called it complicated, brushed off her questions with a smile. But as I sat there in the car, suitcase waiting in the trunk, I knew I couldn't brush it off anymore. When she opened the door, her face went from surprise to concern in seconds. "What happened?" she asked, her eyes flicking to my belly, then back to my face. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words got stuck. So I did what I'd always done. I smiled, small and tight, and said, "I just needed some air." She didn't press. She just stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled like cinnamon and fresh coffee. Toys littered the living room floor. Her kids had been playing some kind of game that involved building forts out of couch cushions. It felt messy, loud, alive. It felt like everything I'd been missing. That evening, I sat at her kitchen table while she cooked spaghetti, steam fogging the windows. My niece tugged at my sleeve, asking if the baby was a boy or a girl. I placed her small hand on my stomach, let her feel the kick, and for the first time in days, I laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a practiced one, but something real. When the phone buzzed again later, another message from my husband, I didn't answer. I let it sit there, screen glowing on the counter. My sister glanced at it, then at me, but she didn't say a word. She just poured me another glass of water and kept stirring the sauce. As night fell, I lay on her couch, the cushions lumpy but comforting, and listened to the hum of her dishwasher, the muffled giggles of her kids, the steady rhythm of a house that felt safe. I thought about my mother-in-law sitting in her spotless living room telling herself I'd be back. Maybe she believed it. Maybe my husband believed it too. But as I drifted off to sleep, hand resting on my stomach, I knew the truth. I wasn't coming back. Not this time. The next morning, sunlight poured through my sister's thin curtains, warming my face before I was ready to wake. I blinked, stretched against the couch cushions, and for a second forgot the weight pressing on me. Then I saw my phone blinking on the coffee table. More messages. This time, not just from my husband. One was from her, my mother-in-law, short, sharp. "Come home, we need to talk." No apology, no concern, just an order. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself a cup of the coffee my sister had left, warming in the pot, and stepped onto the porch. The air was cool, crisp, the kind of morning that carried the smell of damp grass and distant wood smoke. I wrapped my hands around the mug and thought about all the years I'd given them, all the patience, all the waiting. And for what? Another command. Another reminder of my place. By noon the knock came, not polite, heavy, insistent. My sister wiped her hands on a dish towel, opened the door, and there they were, my husband and his mother, standing side by side like they had rehearsed it. His face looked tired. Hers looked carved from stone. "You made your point," she said, pushing past my sister into the living room. "Now pack your things. Enough is enough." I sat at the table, calm on the outside, heart hammering beneath my ribs. My niece peeked from behind the couch, sensing the storm. My sister crossed her arms, ready to intervene if she had to. I already packed, I said softly. That's why I left. Her eyes narrowed. You think running away proves something? This house is your future. Your children's future. Don't be foolish. I let the words settle, heavy in the room. My husband shifted, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. That silence spoke louder than any sentence. For years, I began, my voice steady, you've promised that house. Every time I needed a reason to stay quiet, to endure, you dangled it like a prize. But it was never about giving. It was about control. You never intended to hand it over. She scoffed. Ungrateful, after everything we've done for you. My sister's laugh cut through the tension, sharp and sudden. Done for her? I've watched her babysit, pay bills that weren't hers, cover for your family's mistakes. If that's your idea of generosity, I'd hate to see neglect. My mother-in-law's lips pressed tight, color rising in her cheeks. She turned to me again, voice trembling with anger. You will regret this. Families stick together. Without us, you have nothing. I stood then, slowly, my belly making the movement deliberate, grounded. You're wrong. I have my children. I have my strength. And I have the choice not to raise them under broken promises. The room went silent. For once, she didn't have a comeback ready. She glanced at my husband, expecting him to speak, but he stayed frozen, still staring at the floor. I picked up my phone, tapped the screen, and showed her the messages. Each one saved, each one a record of her words. This isn't loyalty, this is manipulation. I won't let my kids grow up thinking it's love. Her jaw clenched. She grabbed her purse, muttered something under her breath, and stormed toward the door. My husband followed, slower, pausing just long enough to glance back at me. Our eyes met for a heartbeat, but there was nothing left to say. He chose silence again, and silence is still a choice. When the door slammed, my sister exhaled. My niece ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist, pressing her ear to my stomach. The baby kicked, she whispered. And just like that, the room felt lighter. That night, I lay in the guest room at my sister's house, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. My phone buzzed once more, another message from him. Longer this time. Apologies, excuses, confusion. I didn't open it. I slid the phone under the pillow and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a real choice. Not between obedience and defiance, but between living on someone else's terms or finally claiming my own. The house they dangled over me was just wood and brick. It could crumble tomorrow. What mattered was the lesson. Promises meant nothing when they came wrapped in control. I didn't know what the future held. Money would be tight. Raising children without the illusion of family support would be hard. But at least it would be honest. And honesty, after years of half-smiles and half-truths, felt like the only gift worth keeping. The following morning felt different. The air carried that crisp edge that only comes in late September, when the leaves start to loosen and the sky feels wider. I brewed coffee in my sister's small kitchen, the smell filling the house, and listened to her kids laughing in the next room. Their voices tangled with the sound of spoons clinking against cereal bowls, a messy symphony of normal life. I stood there with my hand on my belly, feeling the baby stretch inside me, and realized I hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. My phone sat silent on the counter. No new messages. The last one from my husband still sat unread, a long block of text I didn't need to open to know what it said. Apologies, explanations, promises. Words I had heard before, words that always dissolved when his mother cleared her throat. For once, I wasn't waiting for more. The silence felt like space, not punishment. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside. My sister's porch creaked beneath my weight, the wood soft from years of rain. Across the street, kids rode bikes in uneven circles, one of them wobbling until she toppled onto the grass. She popped back up, brushed her knees, and kept going. Resilience in its simplest form. I found myself smiling at her determination. It struck me then how much of my life had been built on waiting for permission. Permission to belong. Permission to feel secure. Permission to believe promises that never held. My mother-in-law's house was never about generosity. It was about power, about keeping me tethered to a future that shifted whenever she pleased. I thought of all the nights I folded laundry while she watched television, all the dinners where my food was critiqued, all the birthdays that blurred into other people's celebrations. Years of small cuts that taught me to expect nothing. But leaving had shown me something else. Expecting nothing doesn't have to mean accepting it. I could choose differently. I already had. That evening, my sister and I sat on the porch together. She handed me a blanket and a glass of iced tea, even though the air was cooling fast. The streetlights flickered on one by one, and we sat in the glow of them, quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "You know you can stay as long as you need." I swallowed hard, nodding. Gratitude burned behind my ribs. "I know," I said, "but I don't want to live on borrowed time anymore. I want something of my own." She smiled, soft and certain. "Then we'll figure it out, together." The word together echoed in me. It didn't sound like control. It didn't sound like obligation. It sounded like family. Over the next few days, I started making lists. Practical things, jobs I could apply for, schools for the kids, apartments within driving distance of my doctor. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was mine. Every time I crossed something off, the weight in my chest lifted a little more. Meanwhile, word trickled back through relatives. Some said my mother-in-law was furious, pacing her spotless kitchen, insisting I'd regret this. Others said she was quieter than usual, her voice brittle when she mentioned me. I didn't know which version was true, maybe both, but neither mattered anymore. For the first time, her opinion wasn't the axis my world spun on. One night, while tucking my niece into bed, she whispered, "Will you still let me play with the baby?" I laughed softly, brushing her hair back from her face. "Of course," I told her. "This baby will have more love than they know what to do with." The words felt solid, real. That night, lying awake on the couch, I thought about the house again. The promise of it had shaped so much of my life, but now it was just walls I'd never walk through again. Let her keep it. Let her polish the floors and arrange the furniture just so. A house isn't a home when the walls echo with control and resentment. What I was building here, even in the chaos of change, felt sturdier than anything she could hand me. On the morning I finally opened my husband's last message, I read every word slowly. Apologies. Regrets. A plea for me to come back, to think of the children, to remember that his mother meant well. At the end, a promise. She'll change. I swear. I stared at the screen, then set the phone down. I didn't reply. Because I knew the truth. She wouldn't change. And maybe he wouldn't either. But I had. As I folded my laundry that afternoon in my sister's living room, the kids chasing each other down the hallway, I realized the story had shifted. I was no longer the woman waiting for a house. No longer the one hoping a promise would finally be kept. I was the woman who packed a suitcase, who walked out the door, who chose silence over surrender. And maybe one day, years from now, she'll sit in that big house and wonder when she lost her grip. Maybe she'll remember the night she promised me security and followed it with a reminder of my place. Maybe she'll realize that was the moment she lost more than just a daughter-in-law. She lost the chance to ever be trusted again. I don't know if she'll see it that way. I don't know if she's even capable. But as I rocked on my sister's porch that evening, belly round, children's laughter spilling into the twilight, I knew one thing for certain. Her house might still stand, but her power over me had crumbled. And in that quiet, with the baby pressing against my ribs, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not fear, not anger, freedom.